Welcome to the Bold Lounge podcast. My name is Lee Burgess, and I will be your host. If you're anything like me, you love hearing inspiring stories of people who have gone on bold journeys and made a positive impact in the world. This podcast is all about those kinds of stories. Every week, we'll hear from someone who has taken a leap or embarked on an extraordinary journey. In addition to hearing their stories, we'll also learn about their bold growth mindset that they use to make things happen. Whether they faced challenges or doubts along the way, they persisted and ultimately achieved their goals. These impactful stories will leave you feeling motivated and inspired to pursue your own bold journey. I believe everyone has a bold story waiting to be freed. Tune in and get ready to be inspired. Welcome to the Bold Lounge. Today I have Nick Hutchison. He is the founder and CEO of Book Thinkers and also upcoming author of Rise of the Reader. Welcome, Nick.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Can I ask you the first question today?
Sure.
Catch you by surprise. So what is your favorite book of all time?
Oh, man. I'm a very big nonfiction reader. So the first thing that really just came to my mind really like on the fly is Good to Great.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Because I remember reading that very, very early on in my business career. And one of the first things that kind of stuck with me. But like if you look around my office right now, there's piles of books and our family is big into reading. But I'm a big nonfiction reader.
Me too.
Yeah.
And Good to Great is such a great book.
Yeah.
Great book.
Yeah.
Good to Great.
Yeah.
And my favorite takeaway from that book is sort of as you're building a team, you want people, number one, on the right bus, but also in the right seat.
Yeah.
And that's a metaphor that I carry with me from that book. So yeah, great answer. Thank you for indulging my curiosity. I love to switch things up sometimes.
No, I appreciate it. No, I would probably would have been more prepared, but really that was honest and off the cuff. And one that I think has stuck with me for sure. I think there's a lot of power in books, which obviously you know that your whole business is about that. Your upcoming book really is focusing in on how to really, be a reader and how to really soak up things, I think, in a very agile manner. Like you have something that talks about how to do something in 15 minutes, which I'm excited to talk a little bit about today. But let's hear a little bit more about how Nick is bold. What is your definition of bold, Nick?
Well, when I started to think about how to answer this question, I started to think about action. So my definition of bold is action. I think everything stems from taking action. I think people that are bold, they're constantly out there moving, grooving, taking action, oftentimes in the face of fear, despite the feelings of resistance and wanting to hold back, they're continuing to take action. And so that's my definition.
Yeah. So bold is a very active word in your world.
It absolutely is.
Okay.
One of my favorite quotes is from Napoleon Hill. Action is the real measure of intelligence. And so again, when I think about being bold, when I think about living up to your potential, it only happens if you take action.
Right. So when's the first time you took action boldly that you remember that would be a great example of your definition?
You know what? I think starting my business, Book Thinkers, that's really the first time that I decided to step into this. I mean, I have maybe some moments when I was younger playing sports and things like that, but I was a very reserved youngster.
Okay.
I didn't really step outside of my comfort zone or even really gain what I consider to be consciousness. I think until my early 20s, unfortunately. And I remember starting this business. I mean, it was terrifying for me being a business owner, right? And you've kind of recently gone through this experience of starting your business over the last few years as well, from what you've told me. So I think that moment of saying, I am a business owner, I am an entrepreneur, I'm going to go out there and do this. That was really the first time that I felt bold, I think. Yeah.
So what made you do it? What really called you to create Book Thinkers? Because I think every entrepreneur, every business owner is creating something. So what did you have intention in creating when you founded your business?
Yeah, creation, another great verb, right? It's an action. As I was growing up, I was not much of a reader. In fact, I hated reading, to be honest with everybody. I was more of the athlete stereotype, not much of the academic. And that behavior continued with me through most of my college experience. But going into my senior year of college, I took an internship at a local software company. It was a sales position. And my mentor at the time introduced me to podcasting. Podcasting turned into books. So I decided to start reading. I didn't want to live under my potential. And what I realized as I read so many books about great entrepreneurs, right? Richard Branson and Steve Jobs and all of these people, I realized they all had this rebellious nature. They didn't want to conform to society. They wanted to design something that was uniquely fulfilling to them. And every time I read about those stories, I just felt like that's what I'm supposed to do as well. Because I didn't fit into the typical school environments. I didn't enjoy being told what to read and why I should read it and what to think about it. I always kind of had that rebel nature, resistance to what I was being told to conform to. And so I think that's why I decided to start my own business. I didn't have a pre-existing passion around books, right? I had only recently discovered it, but I found the world of personal development and business something that I could dive into and that maybe I could develop a passion for eventually.
Yeah, pretty much that's where you find me in any bookstore. So my husband and my daughter will go to their sections and then I go straight to the business section. And that's where I hang out in the sense of books. And there always seems to be one to buy or two or three. So I'm looking forward to having your book in hand. And we'll talk a little bit more about the book in just a second. But want to talk about Book Thinkers. The tagline for your business is the right book at the right time can change your life. Tell me what that means to you.
Well, I'll tell you what, not only have books changed my lives, but they've changed the lives of so many people that I've been fortunate enough to interact with. So when I first started my business, I experienced a lot of failure for a long time, a number of years, really without making any money and just consistently falling on my face. What kept me connected to the business, though, was this purpose, because as I was sharing the books I was reading on social media and helping authors promote and market their books, I was constantly fulfilled with feedback from people who would say things like, Nick, this book that you recommended, it solved a problem that I was facing and I'm living a better life now. Or, hey, this book that you recommended, it helped me develop a skill and now I'm closer to living up to my potential. Like, thank you. And I really felt connected to this purpose that the right book at the right time can change somebody's life. It can solve a problem. It can develop a skill set. It can help you build confidence, satisfy curiosity. It's productive. It's an action again. And I think the boldest version of ourselves is reading information about people who have lived wonderful lives and were using their best life lessons to improve ours, to remove pain, to develop skills. And I genuinely believe, because I know at this point, I've heard it too many times to think otherwise, that the right book at the right time can change your life, especially if you implement it efficiently.
Yeah. So is there a book that changed your life?
There are a lot of books that have changed my life.
What's the first one that comes to mind?
The first book that I decided to read in the world of personal development, nonfiction business was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Okay.
And that book, it taught me the importance of financial literacy. It taught me that people condense decades of lived experience into days and that you can read about that experience for $20 in a few hours of your time. I went from insecure and shy when the subject of money was brought up to leading those conversations after a couple of books. And so that book opened up this world to me. And now whenever I face a problem, it's not like, oh no, woe is me. It's how can I solve it? Who else has solved it? And how can I use what they did in my own situation?
Yeah. There's no excuse not to be learning in today's world. There's no way, unless you're just not trying, that you can't be learning. And so I think from books, from things that are online, as well as the opportunity to, I think, who knows what's coming with AI in the future. But I have an opinion on that in the sense of I still think humans are greater than AI. I think humans plus AI probably are the most powerful thing, but there is a lot of thinking that goes into that. And I think one of the things that I've seen over the last several years is kind of just the opportunity for people to really be able to get close to books in different ways. One of the things you talked about was living under your potential. That struck me when you said that. How did you know you were living under your potential?
One of the books that I read early on, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware, had a really big impact on me. So Bronnie Ware is an end-of-life palliative care nurse. She'd spend the last couple of weeks, maybe days, with somebody as they transitioned out of this life, right, this body. And she would spend a lot of time talking with these people. And she realized that pretty much everybody dies with 5 regrets. The number one is that people live lives based on other people's expectations of them instead of their own, right? Society's expectations, their parents' expectations, but they never truly step into their actual potential, like who they feel called to be. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But when I read that, right, I'm an employee, I'm working a standard 9 to 5. Book Thinkers was only like just started to become a side hustle. And I thought about, I need to be bold, right? I need to start to take action, bigger action, better action, more confident action. Otherwise, I will live under my potential and I'll end up dying with regret. And that started to become what fueled me. Like, life is so finite. Although we sort of push death to like the edges of society and it's reserved for hospitals and nursing care, like, it's relevant. All of us are going to end up dying. And if we don't take action today, if we don't prioritize better, bolder action, like, we do live under our potential because we're all capable of doing more.
Yeah.
Again, I'm 29 years old, but if you include the books behind me, I'm thousands of years old because these books, they condense decades of other people's lived experience into days. And I just don't want to end up regretting not having done more, if that makes sense.
Right. And no tomorrow is promised. I think that's the thing. I learned that very early on in my life when I lost my brother, when I was 6 and he was 11. And I think just knowing that, soak it all up. And, books are one way to, like you said, to condense your learning into a couple hours, and then you actually can soak up someone's decades of experience.
Yes.
That particular book I'm very familiar with. And then also, just I think being able to understand how to apply it. So what's your advice for someone kind of reading a book in a sense of like, how do you take something and actually implement it? Like, when you have a Lewis Howes book, how do you take a book like that and someone who's so successful and then actually apply it to my normal life?
Right. Great question. So I will say that Rise of the Reader, my upcoming book, has dozens of strategies for effective implementation, but I'll give some examples.
Yeah, give some examples from the book.
Yeah, I think one of the most common issues that people have is they don't read with intention. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I started to realize this actually when I would attend business conferences, because I would ask people, like, why are you here? Why'd you spend your time? Why'd you spend your money? What are you looking to get from it? And they're like, I don't know. I'm just excited. I want to learn from everybody on stage. And they're taking notes about literally all these miscellaneous subjects, most of which aren't relevant to their life. And I just started to realize that people, they understand that they're living under their potential, but they're not really intentional about how to close that gap. So step number 1, when I'm reading a book, is to define my intention. And for me, an intention is a SMART goal. The SMART goal framework is excellent for this. So let's say you're reading The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone, right? You picked it up because you're excited or something like that. And you read it, but you don't have an intention. You'll take notes about all sorts of miscellaneous things, and you'll probably fail to take any action. That's the normal course of reading. But if you were to define a SMART goal for the book, then you're far more likely to read and implement the book. So for the 10X Rule, your SMART goal could be something like, find and implement at least 2 strategies for thinking bigger and apply them to my business by the end of November. So now that goal is specific. You know what you're looking for. It's measurable. Find and implement at least 2 things. It's attainable. I didn't say 10X your business by the end of November. Just find and implement 2 things. You're emotionally connected to it because if you're a business owner, of course you want to grow your business. And time bound by the end of November. Give yourself a deadline to take action. And then I think kind of like next step in my framework is write that goal, write that SMART goal on the inside cover of the book. Just like you, I enjoy physical paper books. I mean, 80% of the inputs to our brain are visual. So by default, all the other senses, like if you're only listening to a book, you're kind of at a loss there. So I love to write that goal on the inside cover of the book and then read it each and every time I read a few more pages of the book so that I can tell my brain what to filter for. Find the actionable strategies that you can implement by the end of November. And again, by setting a strong intention that is measurable and has a deadline, and then filtering for it as you're reading the book, you're setting yourself up for success. So those are a couple of the strategies that I teach inside of my book.
Yeah, I love that because I think, I hear every year, like someone will say, I want to read 20 books. And like, is it the number? Because to me, that's an output, right? Not an outcome. Because we want the outcomes from reading 20 books, right? I'm going to, and using those SMART goals, and you could even just roll up each of the goals you write in your front book, or what if people don't like to write in their book, some people are very picky, but you could, make sure you have it in your journal or whatever, because there's lots of opportunity, I think, too, that you can do and implement when you're reading is not just read the book, but actually make plans, pull out the things that are actionable and that are around those SMART goals that you create.
1000%.
Yeah, so that's something for people, especially as they come into the end of this year, which I think it's all about continuing to crush our goals through the end of the year is, what can you do? What can you pick up? How can you apply it to your business? One of the things that you talked about specifically was failing. And we all do it. I mean, it's human. And actually, I think my biggest learnings are from my failures or things that didn't work out or like, man, I thought that would really go a different way. And it didn't. If you think about, you read a book and you're never going to be those people. That's not the intention. The intention is to pull out and how can I apply this to me, my world? If someone tries something or does something from a very popular book or trying to do something, how do they overcome the failures? And you yourself have, obviously reading lots of books and bringing lots of things into your mindset and things that you were doing. Sometimes things didn't work. How did you overcome that?
Over time, I realized that, just like you said, failure is part of the process. It should be expected. And when you expect it and you realize it's part of the process, it doesn't shock you or knock you off course, right? It's an opportunity to learn, to receive feedback, and to iterate, to change and grow. So I think failure leads to growth. It's one of my biggest qualms with the U.S. public education system. I mean, we're taught from such a young age to conform to society's expectations, to fall in line, to avoid failure. And you'll get penalized from a grading perspective if you fail. And I think we're taught the wrong thing because in business, as you fail, you grow. And it's the best part of the process, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you read and implement things from books, you will fail. And it is part of the process. And it shouldn't surprise you. And you should view it as neutral or maybe even positive, because again, it will lead to progress. So pat yourself on the back, thank yourself for trying. You're being bold, you're taking action, and that's just part of the process.
Yeah. So when you think about marketing a book, and lots of our listeners are either authors themselves, have a book coming out. I myself have a book coming out next fall. What are the key things when you think about growing you grew your business to a 7-figure digital marketing business. What are the things when we think about writing our book that we need to keep in mind when we're marketing our book? Is that part of your book coming out as well?
So I don't talk about marketing books inside of my book, but my agency, Book Thinkers, is a book marketing agency. So I have 10 people on my team. We support about 200 authors a year, and we help people promote and market their books and their brands as authors. So it is definitely something that I'm well versed in. A couple of things to keep in mind. Here are some of the biggest errors that I think authors make. They don't prepare far enough in advance. I just had a conversation with a wonderful author named Vanessa Van Edwards at our first event up on stage. And she said that when the manuscript was finished, like the final I was dotted and the final T was crossed and it was cemented, then she had 12 months of marketing, right? So many people finish their book and it's available the next week and they don't put that marketing energy into the actual launch period. The launch period is too small. So I say at least 3 months. Best case, 6 months. If you could do 12 months of marketing before your book launch and you delay that gratification, like good for you. Yeah. You will have a bestseller. And then once the launch happens, people say, okay, I'm done. But I really think that's when the work begins. I think that once your book launches, if it has evergreen content, if it does act as a business card for your coaching, consulting, speaking, or some other type of business, then you have to wake up every single day, almost for the rest of time, and say, how can I promote and market my book today? Because it's not a flash in the pan. It doesn't stop the minute that the book comes out. It really just starts.
Right.
And it's part of your brand. It's part of who you are. You've put years into building this thing. Give it justice. Like, give it the attention that it deserves and promote and market that thing for years to come.
Yeah. One of the things I think I'm learning through the process is the branding and marketing, like you said, is evolutionary, meaning every day it is evolving. You may think of a new way to apply it to a situation in the world that just happened. I think it's a problem to solve, which always excites me in the sense of like, how do I take this and make it relevant or more relevant? Or how do I help more people with my message, and how do I scale, and how do I get in front of more people to let them know that, they can live the life that they're meant to live. And sometimes it's scary to take that first step, being bold, but you can do it. But it's that first step, and it's a quiet step. Usually it's not anything that needs to be on social media or blasted out anywhere, like just take that step. So I think what I'm learning is like, it's almost a different equation every day. And I just want to underscore what you just said was like, it's not just like a one and done or, I marketed my book, check, I can move on. It just doesn't work that way. So one of the things that I think, that your company does, and also it is you say that you serve mission-driven authors. And I think that's a really important piece. Can you tell me just a little bit about that? Then I'd love to jump into your book.
Well, just like you, I love reading books that I can read, implement, and then use what I've implemented to improve my life, whether it's my health, my business, my personal finances, my relationships, my headspace, my happiness, whatever it is. And I love to support authors who are on a mission to improve the lives of their readers. I love to support authors who are out there teaching the world what they've learned, right? There have been 100 billion people that have lived on this planet. Millions of them have solved major problems in their lives and written books about how to solve those problems, whether it's better leadership, better health, whatever it is. And I want to amplify those voices because I do believe that the right book at the right time can change somebody's life. And as my business continues to grow, you were talking about how book marketing changes. We work in the social media space for the most part. We help authors create short form video content for social media, right? Like we fly out and turn their books into videos. We bring the cameras and the lighting and the scripts and everything. And what I'm realizing is that I'm trying to also make social media a more positive place. It can be negative and divisive and angry. It could trigger anxiety and depression. Or if you follow everybody that we work with, it's positive, it's constructive, it's enlightening, it's good, it's great, it's altruistic. And that's the space that I want to work in. People who are on a mission to improve the lives of the people that read their books and follow them on social media.
What was the flex like when you went from someone helping authors to actually being an author? What was the flex for you and how comfortable, uncomfortable was that for you?
I gained a lot of respect for my author clients. I think I assumed it was a little easier to transfer what's in your head onto a page and then make it actionable and simplify the message. It took me about 3 years, not of consistent effort, but off and on spurts of inspiration to write the book. And then as far as marketing the book, I love podcasting. I love working with influencers. I love creating video content for my own community and providing value. So I had a lot of fun with that piece. But I'll tell you what, when I got my first copy, you see some authors, they do an unboxing video and they're crying and it's like this massive moment. For me, it didn't happen like that. Like I genuinely believe this book is going to change lives and I can't wait to hear the feedback from it. But it's part of the process for me. Like I talk about these subjects so often that it doesn't feel like it's going to be new or anything. It's useful. It's a tool. And that's just, I don't know. I never had like that crying moment or anything.
Yeah. So what really called you to write this book?
Well, as I've built my community, we do about 1 million impressions a month right now on Instagram, reviewing books and talking about books. I've received hundreds and hundreds of the same questions. Like, how do I choose the right book? How do I take effective notes? How do I retain more? How do I put my notes into action and actually change my behavior? And I would always answer people, right? I'm motivated by this. I'd send a voice note back or I'd type something out or jump on a quick Zoom call. But I felt like I was almost underserving my community for 2 reasons. Number one was that the medium with which I was answering people didn't lend itself to long form content. So I couldn't share everything that I had learned. But then also number 2, I found that I had never actually taken the time to define what I was doing to implement these books. Like, how the heck does Nick Hutchison implement books? And so what I had to do was almost pause and observe my own behavior from a third-party perspective and say, oh, this is what I'm doing. And then try to define that and make it something that somebody else could understand and implement. Because I do think that these books have the opportunity to change our lives. But like we talked about with the intention example, so many people they're not executing against these books the way that they could be. There are more efficient practices out there. And so I wanted to write the book on the subject because I couldn't find one.
Yeah. So what if you could pick, some of the key tips in there, and we've talked about a couple of them, what would be one of the priority tips for someone as they're out there, and every single listener of this podcast has a stack of business books, and I have, got new shelves from IKEA just so I can put more books on it. But what should we do? Like, how do we strategize when we have so much good stuff to read?
Yes, great question. And I'm happy that you love reading as much as I do, because not everybody does.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I love to recommend is scheduling reading time into your calendar. So you alluded to the 15-minute example before, so we can dive into it.
Okay.
If somebody I'll start here. If somebody tells me that they're not a reader, like, oh, I don't have time to read, I love to ask them the following question. If I paid you $10,000 to read a book by the end of the month, do you think you could do it? And that same person's like, well, I could read 5, right? So they've fallen into my trap. Yeah. It's not a question of whether or not we can read. It's a question of whether we value it enough to prioritize it in our schedule. Mm-hmm. And so if we do value it, like you do and like I do, the next step is scheduling reading time into your calendar. So for somebody that's brand new to the space, I love to say, instead of trying to find time, let's replace a low impact activity like scrolling on social media or watching Netflix with reading a good book. Mm-hmm. Not the entire activity, but just a little bit of it. Let's say 15 minutes of scrolling in the morning and 15 minutes of Netflix in the evening, just the first 15 minutes with reading a good book. And if you could do that twice a day, 15 minutes, you'll probably read about 20 pages if you're just starting out in 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. 20 pages a day, 5 days a week, take the weekends off. It's 100 pages a week. I mean, you and I know most of these books, they average like 200 pages these days. So that's a book every 2 weeks. Yeah. That's 26 books in the next 12 months by replacing a little bit of meaningless scrolling on social media and a little bit of meaningless Netflix in the evening with reading a great personal development book that will serve your future self. Like your future self will be patting you on the back saying, thank you so much for reading these books. Because listen, at the end of the day, you probably don't even remember the main characters in the Netflix show that you watched 6 months ago. Like that's the definition of meaningless from my perspective.
Or they think it's all or nothing, right? They think that, I can't watch the puppy videos or I can't watch Beckham on Netflix, like whatever it may be. But it's just, you're actually, again, I'm going back to one of the words you said earlier, being intentional with your time, intentional with your goal. I think I really get tired of people saying I can't or it's impossible. And I always respond with, it's a choice.
It is.
You're making choices.
It is a choice.
You're making choices that are putting you into that situation where you're saying you can't. And so thinking about if you do want to read and the intentionality of the books on your shelves and thinking about where you are and kind of maybe picking one up that you just skimmed, thought it looked cool, but you never read it. Like, why did you get that book? And thinking, how is it relevant to your life right now? And using what Nick just talked about, the kind of the 15-minute method and kind of working up, and you could read 26 books in a year. And that's a lot of books. And I think the other thing is like leaders are readers. And I really believe that because what it does is it expands our mind. It helps us understand, helps us gain knowledge, also understand different points of view, vantage points, things we've experienced, maybe not experienced ourselves, but someone else has. You gain. So what are the things that you see as, I would say, positive outcomes of being a reader?
There are so many. I think when I think about reading as a task, I think about a problem that many of us face today, which is instant gratification. We can't focus on anything for more than a couple of minutes. We have to jump between tasks. And that's a very inefficient way to live. Mm-hmm. What's nice about reading a book, doesn't even matter what kind of book it is you're practicing monotasking. You're developing your ability to do deep work, to stay in one task and avoid distractions for 15 minutes at a time, for a half an hour at a time, for an hour at a time. Like I sort of joke, if I ever had to go back into the traditional 9-to-5 world and I was interviewing and somebody asked me what my strengths are, I could say, I can sit down distraction free and work for multiple hours in a row. And I think that reading has helped me build and strengthen that skill set. It's one of the best ways, I think, to develop focus and attention is reading a physical paper book.
Yeah.
So that's one.
Yeah. I think that's hard for a lot of people. I know it's hard for me sometimes. And I remember actually suggesting that to one of my clients of like, just focus on one thing, the monotasking. And they laughed out loud at me. And I'm like, Okay. I was like, just kind of sitting there with a stone face. I was like, no, I'm serious. It actually is an effort. And then your brain works differently during that time frame. We have this perception of like, the more I do across, the better it will be. But we know logically that that's not how it works. We know that inch deep does not actually get things done at the levels or at the depth that we truly want them to be done. Right. So I love the idea that actually, reading a book not only adds all these other things, these positives, but it helps you actually probably build a muscle of monotasking that we're not normally actually expected or allowed to do on a regular basis. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree 1000%. Like I said, I think it's almost a differentiating skill set if you're able to do it these days.
Yeah. No, I love that. So as we close out the podcast, I just want to make sure that folks understand the rise of the reader and the intention of it. How did you create the title? Like, where did the title come from? And what do you want to make sure people know about the book?
Rise of the Reader. When I was growing up, reading wasn't cool. It wasn't something that the cool kids did, right? They played sports. And so as a result, I shied away from reading as well. I mentioned I wasn't much of a reader growing up.
Yeah.
I think that reading is cool. I think that it is the new cool thing to do as a business owner, as a young professional, as a professional of any age, really. These books become a point of familiarity. They become a point of conversation. And as you read and implement, you change your behavior and you rise to your potential. Rise as a word, it has action built into it. And that's what I'm trying to encourage people to do. Take better action on the information that you're reading. So that's how I came up with the title. This feeling of elevation, of action, of enlightenment that comes from reading and implementing books. And if people in the audience choose to read this book, they will get more from the other books that they're reading. We talked about a couple of things today, such as setting an intention for the books that you're reading. But there are so many good implementation frameworks in here that I think people can use. Implement them. I teach you how to implement them, but implement them and use them on the other books that you're reading so that if you have a problem in your life with leadership or personal finance or health, you can find the right book, implement the right book, solve the problem, and not have to deal with it anymore. Life doesn't have to be so hard. Other people have figured it out, and then you can use these books as a shortcut.
Yeah, you make reading actionable with your book. I think that's the key thing. This isn't a book about how to read. This is a book about how to be intentional with your reading and then put it into action to actually change your life, to make it better, to make it happier, to make it healthier, to make you more successful. So I love that because it really is a tool then that's a catalyst for people to move forward in their life in a better way, in an improved way, an elevated way.
Yes, 100%. The right book at the right time can change your life if you implement it.
Right. And make it actionable, which is, we've talked about that the entire time. So I think that's definitely something for people to take away. Well, thank you for creating a book that's going to make a difference in people's lives, because I think that's what it's all about. And for spending time on the Bold Lounge. All the information about Nick's new book is in the episode notes. Thank you so much for being on this episode.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Bold Lounge podcast. Through the continuum of bold stories, vulnerability to taking a leap, you will meet more extraordinary people making a positive impact for others through their unique and important story. By highlighting these stories, we hope to inspire others and share the journey of those with a bold mindset. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast and look forward to sharing the next bold journey with you.